Welcome to this episode of In This Corner with CYRUS FEES. I am CYRUS FEES, and we, of course, take a look and talk to some of the biggest stars in combat sports, whether it be boxing, mixed martial arts, professional wrestling, and then even work some other sports in as well. But, of course, we'll go back to the basis of this, and that is mixed martial arts. And one of the pioneers in mixed martial arts and one of the pioneering teams in mixed martial arts, of course, is Team Quest up in Oregon. And one of the men that helped kick off the boom in the mid-2000s was the man that I have with me today, Nate Quarry, part of the original Ultimate Fighter, a man that had an extensive career in the UFC and all throughout mixed martial arts, and now has went on to do a ton of things outside of the sport. So let's touch base with Nate right now. We'll go up to Oregon, and I am here with Nate Quarry. Nate, how you doing?
I'm good, man. It's good to see you. We haven't worked together in quite a while. This is cool.
Yeah, well, things happen.
That's true.
If you haven't noticed.
My favorite commentating job with you was where we were, Kazakhstan.
Yes.
And as we were commentating the fight, you said, so Nate, you were able to sit down with this team and develop their game plan and hear what they're planning on doing. What do they have to say? And I look at you and I'm like,
you had never met that fighter.
I don't even speak their language. And you just start laughing. And you said that like 3 times that night. So
Yeah.
Every time I just had to be like, oh yeah, steady game plan. And they're planning on sticking with it. Awesome.
Well, you adapted as we went, which was good. And but we had a lot of fun, of course, like you said, working with Brave Combat Federation there in Kazakhstan, and then going on to work in India as well, which was very exciting, and had Mike Tyson in the building. What a wild time that was. So that being said, let's talk a little bit. Now, you're up in Oregon. I'm down here in Tennessee. But one thing we have in common is that we're all quarantined. We all have to stay at home, which kind of brought about this television program. But it's a lot of fun because I get to sit down with some old friends and some interesting people here in the sport. So tell me how things have been for you. Obviously, you're in a beautiful area of the world. You can see there right behind you, gorgeous. It's a beautiful day there. Talk about being quarantined and COVID-19 and everything that's going on with it.
I think the biggest thing is that I love my wife and we can get along for extended periods. I think if we were battling every day, this would just about be unbearable. But you may not even know this, 4 months ago, we had an addition to our family. Atticus Kaleo. Winter's Quarry was born. I couldn't remember if I told you or not. And so this is amazing because we get to spend so much time, 24 hours a day, just at home with him, interacting with him, spending our time with him, which is really, it's something you'll never get back. The bad part is that we get to spend 24 hours a day with him as he's crying, screaming, shitting himself, all that kind of stuff. But
Absolutely. No, I get it. And that is, if there is a silver lining to the current situation, is we get in such a grind every day and we're doing so many things. And, I travel all over the place, and we get into this work routine, and you kind of forget about, why you work so hard, to give yourself those nice things to provide for your family and to take care of your family. And now we actually get time to spend with our families. So, and like you said, I think it's actually lucky that, like you said, you get to spend time with the new baby and with your family. And what an important thing in anybody's life. And I know I'm seriously treasuring the time I'm getting with my kids right now. Even if I want to pull my hair out sometimes, they're awesome. And I love the time that I get with them. So I totally understand that. As far as the whole COVID-19 thing, and I'll drift into politics for a minute, but how about the effect on the sport? Because obviously it's affecting everything, and mixed martial arts, combat sports, just events in general are postponed, are stopped. I know one organization tried to make it happen, still desperately trying to make it happen. But just talk about, what it's done to MMA and maybe your thoughts on what UFC is trying to do by putting it on an island and taking it everywhere under the rainbow.
well, it's kind of interesting to look and see how important all of us workers really are. They talk about we need to give these huge tax breaks to the business creators because without them, where would we be? Well, they've gotten these huge tax breaks. I think 10% of the population owns 85% of the stock market. And yet when we can't go to work, everything falls apart. So to me, this is like a lesson about MMA fighters and how we really do have the power. Because if you want to fight, you need somebody that will fight you. If you want to make money, you need fans to come and watch. But
Sure.
then all of a sudden, this promoter comes in and says, well, hey, I'll get the venue and keep 85% of the money. You cool with that? And that's the way it's always been, whether you look at football, baseball, basketball, boxing, MMA. You have somebody who comes in and says, well, I created the team jersey, so I get to keep most of the money. And you're playing football, you're making 50 grand a year for 3 months out of the year. You got to live your dream before you get to go back to the factory. What more could you want?
Yeah.
And the players finally said, in football especially, they weren't even washing the jerseys. So the players came together and said, no, we actually want rights. We are the product that you're pushing. Without us, you have nothing. Nobody is paying to watch Dana White stand in the middle of an octagon and pontificate about world events.
Sure.
It's the fighters that are the driving force of this. And I hope that they're really learning this now. They're understanding the power that they have. And when fighters ask me for advice, somebody starting out their career, I don't give them boxing advice, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu. My advice is always the same. Treat this like a business, because everyone around you is, from your manager, your agent, the promoter especially, even your coaches. They have bills that they have to pay. They have gyms that they have to fund. If you do not treat it like a business, you will be left broken at the end of it. You have to do it for the love of the sport, because it's too hard to do otherwise. But at the same time, you have to look at this. John Jones is a perfect example. Somebody fell out of one of his fights. Dana White calls up Chael and says, hey, I want you to fight John Jones. Chael, sure, I'll do it. So they went to John Jones, and John went, no, I'm not going to do that. I've been preparing to fight somebody else this whole time. I'll fight him later when I have a camp specifically set up to beat Chael Sonnen. And everyone booed him, called him a coward, said he was a loser. This is his career. This is how he takes care of his family. And I think a lot of people don't understand, when you're a fighter, that one day, your entire year is based on that one day. And you may walk out with 50% of your income. Oh, plus you just lost a bunch of sponsors. Plus you're not going to get the next fight you want. Plus maybe you're not going to have pay-per-view points on the next fight. You have to treat this like a business and understand your value. And I wish throughout my career that I had somebody in my corner who was looking out for those things.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because everybody is everybody always wants to go back to how it was and that it was better back in the day and that sort of thing. But that was a situation with most sports. I mean, look at basketball. It's the same way. These guys are being traded to different teams and they have a lot more power, and they want to play with their friends. They make it happen. If they want to ask for a trade, they ask for a trade. Back in the day, guys stays with teams forever, but it's better now that they do have more power. It's really at the end of the day, and just because it was old school and just because that's how it was back in the day doesn't mean it was better for the competitor. And that's very, very true with fighting, because like you said, I'm sure you have a ton of, not just with Dana White, but a ton of bad promoter stories and these situations where these guys have just been unruly and treat you guys like, just as an asset, basically. You go out there and fight, and that's the end of it. No matter how bad you get hit, how bad you get hurt, we might cover your hospital bills. We might not cover your hospital bills. Good luck. So now, it seems like, with guys like your McGregors and some of these guys that have taken their careers into their own hands, that it's starting to lean that way, but I think it still has a long way to go. It has a long way to go when it comes to fighting.
That's an interesting thing, though, bringing up McGregor, and congratulations to him on his success. Congratulations to him on his massive payday when he fought Floyd Mayweather. But let's not pretend he had the same journey that, say, a Neil Magny had in the UFC. Let's look at how much he was paid from the very beginning of his time in the UFC. And if a Neil Magny, and I just throw out his name because he's a buddy of mine, we've spoken about this. He was the one that pointed it out to me. He said, look at how much I was being paid my first few fights in the UFC. Look at how much Conor was being paid. And this all wraps back down into the Ali Act. The Ali Act says that a promoter cannot have an invested interest in a boxer. MMA doesn't have that. So the UFC can look at Conor McGregor and go, I like this kid. He talks well. He's from a country we really want to break into. He'll bring in millions of pay-per-view buys. Instead of paying him $10,000 to show, let's give him 50. Let's give him 100.
Yeah.
And technically they don't own the fighter, but they're choosing to invest in him to make him more successful. Like my fight against Rich Franklin, where I was paid $10,000 for my title shot. If they would have come to me and said, we want to give you $100,000, we think you can do well in this, that would have changed my camp completely. I would have been able to bring in the best trainers, the best dietitians, everything. Would I still lost? That's really not the point. The point being that when the UFC, when a promoter decides that they want to invest in a fighter, it gives them an unfair advantage. And the UFC has been doing this from the beginning. I think it was Cyborg. They were trying to set up a fight with somebody, but she was too big. And Dana White came right out and said, I will hire Mike Dolce to train with her and get her down to size. And I was like, cool. She should work with Mike Dolce. He's a great trainer. He's right on point. The promoter should not be the one setting that up. In any other sport, that's illegal. The NFL can't say, well, we want LA and New York in the Super Bowl, so, we're just going to raise their salary cap $10 million. And this is what's best for the sport. It's what the fans want to see. So if you don't get that, that's on you. You're not a team player. That's not sports. Yeah. That's pro wrestling, where they're making things happen so they'll get the biggest payday. Sports is supposed to be the last bastion where people can show up, make their best effort, win or lose. We see the heart displayed. We see the skill. I want to see the UFC be what it's supposed to be.
Well, do you think –
just a promoter.
Let me interject here. And do you think, because I say this all the time to people that, when I hear people complain about certain things, and even though it might be right, wrong, or indifferent, I always come back to it's the fight business. This is how fighting's been forever. And it's not that I think that's how it should be. That's just reality. It's how I always look at it.
That's why things never change. Because
you're right.
people
You're
look
absolutely
at things
right.
how they are.
I agree.
Say, what are you going to do? Well, that's when they pass the all.
It is up to these people, these revolutionaries, people like yourself, to take that stance and to move things in the right direction. So I totally agree with what you're saying. And like I said, I'm not endorsing the way things are, but let me just ask you a hypothetical. If things were that way, straight down the middle, they're not building up the super fights, they're not doing this, not doing that, putting people in rankings where they shouldn't be, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think that the popularity would be what it is, or do you think that because they formulate these matchups and get behind certain guys that know how to talk, that is what creates more popularity, more pay-per-view buys, more ratings, et cetera, et cetera?
It would be a better job for the fighters and for the fans, no doubt whatsoever, because the cream rises to the top. Instead of the UFC choosing some handsome blonde guy who's never really fought and deciding he's going to be the next big thing and giving him tomato cans over and over again to try and get him a winning record, instead, all they have to do is, here's a guy who's just winning fights, knocking people out. And I'm sorry, not everyone is going to be the Conor McGregor, the trash-talking guy. A lot of guys just go out there and do their job and win. And fans are going to want to see that. But as a promoter, I'm sorry. Every champion in every weight class is not going to be a Conor McGregor type of superstar. Again, that's the nature of sports. In Bellator, Ben Askren, most people thought he was a very boring fighter. Joe Rogan was a huge fan of his, saying, if you think he's boring, beat him. But instead, they kicked him out. So now the best fighter in Bellator was gone. And I'm sorry, but that's how sports are. Sometimes you're going to get a champion that isn't the most exciting. But look at boxing right now. Those guys, they weren't manufactured. And we saw one of the greatest heavyweight fights of all time. Knockdown late in the fight, struggling to get back up. These stories write themselves.
So what? Well, I mean, I'm iffy on that one. I'm iffy on that one because you know how boxing is too. And listen, go to a local boxing show, once things get back, but go to a local boxing show and see how those promoters build up their fighters. You're bringing in guys, and I think it's actually borderline disgraceful the way boxing acts, and not all promoters, but
is it promoters or is it their managers, their agents, and their
whoever's
coaches?
Putting the fights together? I mean, I imagine that you lean on the promoter for that, but whoever's matchmaking these fights, but you get guys that travel in for a payday, $200, $500, and they may have a record of, I don't know, 5-72 or 4-38, and they're fighting a 3-0 prospect, and they're getting knocked out and taking home $300 in what could be, in my estimation, because of the way it's operated and the way the sport is, one of the most dangerous sports ever, because the amount of headshots these guys take repeatedly over and over and over again. Rather with MMA, where things can be stopped, et cetera, at certain times, they tend to let things go. So I disagree with you on boxing. I think maybe in certain situations, maybe it's better, but I really think the way they manufacture their pro fighters are pretty rough.
Let me respond to that. So no disagreement whatsoever with that. But again, because the promoter is just the one putting on the show, of course he wants to put on the best show, but then you have free agency because the promoter can't lock down these fighters into long-term contracts. A manager, an agent, a coach, of course, they're going to do everything that they possibly can to continue to build up their fighter. But eventually they get to the top and there is no protection left.
No, I agree with you there. Yeah, 100%. That once the cream rises to the top, you're absolutely right. You're going to figure out, and you see a lot of guys that make the jump from the regional scene in MMA, may have 10 wins, they go to UFC and get smashed. I mean, it happens all the time.
Well, let's go back to Conor McGregor again. How many people did he jump over to get that original title shot, and fighting for the interim title against Chad Mendes, who took the fight on 2 weeks' notice, jumped over Frankie Edgar, all these guys whose style was specifically designed to beat a Conor McGregor takedown ground, and Chad Mendes was working him for 9 minutes and 50 seconds, again, because he took the fight on 2 weeks' notice. And who did the UFC want to win in that one? Well, let's see. Chad Mendes flew on Southwest to the fight. Conor McGregor flew on a private jet to the fight. Chad Mendes, with a phenomenal performance, never got another rematch. So to me, the corruption, you're going to find it no matter where you look. But at least in boxing, you have the protection of the Ali Act, where a promoter cannot blatantly say, this is my guy, I'm going to mess with the rankings, make him that he jumps. Oh, if you're not going to sign a long-term contract with me, you don't get a title fight. And that's what the UFC does. They have it in the contract. Oh, you want to fight for a title? Cool. You have 5 more fights. Or every time that you fight for the title, you get 1 more fight. It's the championship contract clause. And you can see what that's done to the sport in some respects, where the greatest fight that never happened, Fedor versus Couture. Because Fedor wouldn't sign away his rights, his likeness in perpetuity to the UFC. And because they had Randy under a long-term contract, it never happened.
I mean, a guy in Fedor, that's a perfect example of somebody that's always pretty much had his career in his hands, which is a good example of that. So let's veer off of that a little bit. Let's take it back to the good old days, if you will. Let's talk about Team Quest. And, you know, you were a part of a huge menagerie of awesome fighters from back in the day. I can run through some of them, and obviously you guys had different gyms in different areas as well, but Dan Henderson, Randy Couture, Matt Lindland, Chael, Evan Tanner. This list
Eddie
just
Herman,
continues.
Chris Lieben,
of course.
Josh Haynes, Josh Berkman. And then any given day, John Hackelman would show up. Rico Rodriguez would show up. BJ Penn would show up for a week. It was just an incredible time. And you never know. Brandon Vera showed up with a couple of guys, and it was just amazing to see him right at the start of his career. And that was one of the things that kind of opened my eyes. I'm sparring with Brandon Vera, much bigger than me, very talented guy. And I feel like, even in retrospect, I feel like I maybe got the better of him by a hair's margin. And again, sparring back in those days was kind of a blood sport type of thing. Yeah. But we're standing and bagging. At the end of the round, Brandon looks at me and goes, "Bro, you hit hard. That was good." And it was cool.
Yeah.
Fast forward now to, I've left Team Quest, and that's a whole different story. As the gym was kind of falling apart, it's a shadow of what it once was. I need sparring partners. I'm invited to go down to Team Quest in Temecula and train down there. So I fly down to Temecula. As soon as I arrive, they go, "Psych, you're not welcome here. Good luck." Brandon hears that I'm down in Temecula. He's like, "Brother, come train with me." So I go train with Brandon at one of his gyms down there. In 20 years of sparring, He was the only guy I ever asked to slow down. He was beating the crap out of me so badly, but in a nice way. He wasn't teeing off on me. He just hit me, turned the corner, hit me again. And I looked at him and I said, Brandon, you're beating me so badly, I can't even see what you're doing. And he's like, oh, sorry, brother. And what I realized right there, to go from being essentially equal to being to the point where I have to tell, and I've sparred with Henderson, Randy, everybody, never said, dude, slow down a little bit. You're beating shit out of me. With Brandon, I had to say that. And so I looked at him and I went, well, what have I been doing at Team Quest? Sparring 6 days a week. We would do maybe 10 minutes of technique. We didn't have a kickboxing coach, didn't have a boxing coach. Our jiu-jitsu coach was a purple belt, got his purple belt 2 weeks after I did. Didn't have a conditioning coach, whereas Brandon has the best coaches in the world, making him a phenomenal athlete. And I realized, oh my God, what have I been doing? I need to get with those coaches and make a better career. It was very, very eye-opening for me to once again look at the situation, treating it like a business. Well, was Team Quest looking out for my success, trying to give me everything I could to provide for my family and my career? Or was it more about taking home the money from the students that were signed up there? Was it about Randy taking his fights, Matt Lindland taking his fights, that kind of stuff? So once again, I had to, it's not show friends, it's show business type of thing.
Yeah, 100%. And we've we've kind of veered here, and I was trying to talk about the good old days of Team Quest. You're like, well, it wasn't that great. That being said, I was just looking at lineups, and as far as in my, and I got into MMA a little bit later than most, but when I go back, I always hear about Militich fighting systems, and I'm from Iowa, so obviously I have a little background there. And with Militich, they always kind of, when you look back in history, they're always kind of known as that big super team from back then. They created all the guys. And then Quest, maybe secondary. Do you think, in your opinion, how do they stack up against each other? Do you think Quest had the stronger lineup, or do you think Militich had the stronger lineup?
So, boy, you want to talk about good stories, but you asked me these questions. So towards the end of my time at Team Quest, I had just had a spinal fusion back surgery. And so I had a lot of time, 6 months where I'm sitting on the sidelines and I'm not allowed to do any training whatsoever. So I'm sitting there watching practice, and I'm realizing how disjointed it is. Nobody knows what's going on. We don't have any structure. As I mentioned, we didn't have any of the coaches. And I'm sitting there watching this one thing. Paulus was teaching a jiu-jitsu move. And I'm watching Mike Dolce train it. And he's having a difficult time with it. And I'd seen this before. So I walked over and I said, hey, put your hands here, do this. And he just looks at me and goes, would you ever do this in a fight? I was like, oh, no, I wouldn't. This is a gi jiu-jitsu pass. He goes, is anyone wearing gis? We're a fight school here. What's going on? And then it kind of made me step back and really look at things. The biggest comparison, and I'm a very black and white type of guy. I want to see the numbers so I can formulate my opinion. How many champions did Team Quest generate from nothing? Dan Henderson, silver medalist in the Olympics. Randy Couture, world-class wrestler, wrestled all around the world. Oh, no, wait. Dan Henderson, Olympian, not a silver medalist. Matt Lindland, silver medalist, Greco-Roman. Yeah. So we had 3 world champions right there from wrestling. How many guys walked in off the street and became a world champion due to Team Quest coaching and production of fighters? Now let's check out Militich.
Okay.
Rich Franklin, Tim Sylvia. The list goes on and on and on, to where if you look at them, they create champions, they build champions. And in flying in the face of the Ali Act, they had their own promoter. What's his name?
Monty Cox.
Monty Cox. And I sat with Monty Cox in front of everybody at Team Quest. We were out at a bar, which was already causing trouble because here I am speaking with the enemy's manager. And I'm asking him how he manages his fighters and this and that. And he looks at me and goes, do you think it's just luck, coincidence that I have all of these champions underneath me? I build champions. And he is the promoter that would put together the show, bring in his fighter, cherry picked a fighter against him. Didn't always work out for the best for him. I know, because I beat one of his guys who was undefeated at the time. But then I got blacklisted out of every Monty Cox show after that. But
the good old days.
Yeah, they knew how to do the right training and bring guys together to build champions, not just take somebody who is a world-class something already and help them along that route. Big difference.
Yeah. Well, that answers a few questions. Most definitely. I'm going to ask a few rapid fire and then I'm going to get you out of here. We already talked.
I got nothing else. I said all day. So
yeah, I know. I got to try to fit a Chael Sonnen interview. And, we know he likes to talk as well. So this is no problem. We're going to have to cut some things out. Maybe we'll do an extended version online. That being said, some real quick rapid fire here. We already talked about McGregor. We touched on that a little bit. What do you make of Khabib? This guy seems to be kind of a prototype. Pretty amazing all around. What do you make of Khabib? Somewhat quickly.
Oh, just an incredible wrestler, incredible competitor. Seeing the way that he just manhandles guys, he's really the next level of fighter in his world. I'd like to see his stand-up get a little better, but I feel like in some fights he's so good with when he wants to impose his will, he'll actually kind of take the round off and go, I'm just going to work on stand-up this round, or work on my head move and throw some punches. It's not working out so well for me. I'll just take him down and beat on him. So I think he's very impressive. Big fan.
Yeah, he's awesome. Ultimate Fighters, obviously, I think they're on 72 now, 78. I don't know what it is. What do you have you even glanced at it? Have you taken a look at it? What do you think of what it's become now, where it was so groundbreaking at the time, and reality TV just in general was? What do you make of it now?
Boy, this is tough for a quick answer.
I know.
Season one.
I thought about that once I was saying that.
Season one had 8 guys stay in the UFC. A 9th guy, Bobby Southworth, won a title, I think, at Strikeforce, because we were some of the best fighters, unsigned fighters in the country. And we were fighting before it was cool, before it was popular, before you could make a dime doing it. We were fighting for the love of the game. Again, do it because you love it, and then treat it like a business. Nowadays, you have guys that want to be famous, want the chicks, want the money, whatever the case may be. And the talent pool is just not there anymore. My suggestion, and I made this suggestion years ago, 16 guys, middleweights, light heavyweights, take 8 guys or 8 women that are already signed to the UFC. Guys that you know are good enough to fight in the UFC. Have them do it.
Sure.
Pay them during the show, pay them for their fights. But at the end, now you're going to have somebody who will legitimately deserve a title shot. And oh, by the way, now all of the fans intimately know 8 light heavyweights, 8 middleweights that are good enough to stay in the UFC. You do that for every weight class, for men and women, you're going to have an entire roster of people that are cheering for, booing against, and they'll be some of the best ever. Nowadays, you have entire seasons where the guys aren't good enough to stay in the UFC. You don't even know who won the season.
Yeah, it's something. I'm going to make a hard, sharp turn here. One thing that everybody's talking about is the Tiger King. Have you watched it? What do you think about it? Give me your take.
That's money, man. Of course I have. I'm in lockdown.
Carol Baskin kill her husband?
Probably. But it's one of those things. I had a guy tell me once, he goes, I believe in Bigfoot. I saw Bigfoot as a kid. And he tells me the whole story, and I'm kind of nodding. He goes, and I know what you're thinking. You want to believe, but you're not sure. And I said, in reality, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't affect my life whatsoever. So did Carol Baskin kill her husband? Probably. Doesn't affect me. We're not neighbors. I don't have to worry about her putting a tiger loose in my house, anything like that. To me, it's just more insanity. And as I'm watching this, I said to my wife, see these people? This is why Trump wins some states. Toothless.
Oh. Yeah. We didn't dig into that, and maybe next time around we will. Nate, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day. It was a lot of fun. I can't wait till we can get back, put the headsets on, and call some more fights together. Maybe next year. Let's see what happens.
I love commentating fights with you. And going to the fights, sitting ringside. That's just awesome. I remember in Kazakhstan, chasing down a fighter who I think had lost or was upset with the outcome, and he's running away, and I'm chasing him down, going, dude, come back. You need to do this interview. You never know what's going to go on at the fights.
All right. Well, where can everybody find you online real quick? Where can they find you and connect with you?
Nate Quarry on Twitter. That's where I'm at mostly. I'm sorry, I'm mostly bitching about politics these days because it just drives me nuts. ZombieCageFighter.com. As you see on my t-shirt, We just finished my 6-issue miniseries, the autobiographical horror story that is Zombie Cage Fighter. If you go to zombiecagefighter.com, you can download a free PDF of the comic book, and that will give us your email so we can email you to let you know about the upcoming Kickstarter for the trade paperback, so I can get that thing published and get the story out there, which I am ridiculously proud of. It turned out really good. I've had a great team around me.
Awesome, man. Send it over to me. I would definitely want to check it out. Thank you so much, Nate. We definitely appreciate it. And we got more to come here. We have the American Gangster. He's going to be live here with us. That's coming up right here on In This Corner.